Welcome everyone to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Tara. We talk about TV shows here. The year is 2022 and the name of the show is Babylon 5. This is season 4, episode 16. It is called Exercise of Vital Powers. So full spoilers for the episode. This one focuses mainly on two plots. One is Garibaldi's trip to Mars, so there's a lot to get into with that and some interesting plot threads that are going to be coming out of it, I would say. And then the other plot is dealing with the telepaths and when I say telepaths, I mean specifically the telepaths that are asleep, the ones that were rescued from the shadows that Franklin's trying to wake up and like sort of fix, but he's not having much luck, and Lita inadvertently gets involved, and then that sort of sends them on something by the end of the episode. So those are the main plots. Obviously, we know Sheridan's on his way with the fleet. They're attacking more outposts and like taking back different things, but we don't focus on that this episode. We just hear a little bit from them at the start and the end. The rest of the plot is mainly on the ones I've already mentioned, so they get a lot of focus.
Mm-hmm.
So, very, very interesting stuff. What did you think of this one, Tara?
I thought it was very good. I do not think that my prophecies of predictions are panning out so well.
You really wanted the guy not to exist.
I did. He exists.
Yes.
That's all right. Thank you, people who watch us, for not giving it away and letting me continue with my silly theory.
Yeah, Edgar's is a real person. And I just looked at his name on IMDb. The actor's got a hell of a name here. The actor is Ephraim Zimbalist Jr.
Yes. Yeah. There's two Ephraims out there.
You making a Star Trek reference?
No, because he's a junior.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's not quite Zephram, but close.
It's close to Zephram. It made me think of Zephram Cochrane from Star Trek. So yeah, no, this stuff's pretty interesting actually. So you got like a bit of like a, I mean, it's like he's doing a log, but it's like a bit like a noir narration at the start and the end from Garibaldi. He's like,
yeah, they're doing a lot of noir stuff for him because he's, a PI.
Yeah, he's like, I never really wanted to go back to Mars because it almost killed me twice, and I didn't want to give it the third chance to finish me off, but here I am again.
Is it quoting a movie? Do you know? Because he keeps saying Mars. Can't believe I'm back on Mars. And it's so close to what I feel like is a movie quote, but I can't put my finger on it.
It might be a specific one. I got the impression that it was just because I think that's just a general thing that they say in noirs.
Saigon. I can't believe I'm still in Saigon, or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like it's just a general thing. Maybe there is a very specific one that it's directly like paraphrasing, but yeah. It sounded like just generic kind of noir, like detective, gritty speak to me. But so he does meet Edgar's quite quickly in the episode. He has to wear a blindfold at first. He's not happy about it, but he gets taken to Edgar's secret headquarters on Mars.
Actually, I gotta throw this little detail in there. I liked the blindfold. I like the design of the blindfold because it had a little notch for the nose. For the nose.
Okay.
So it actually does cover both eyes. I don't know. I thought that was, I hadn't seen that before, and it makes a lot of sense.
I love that Tara's enthusiastic because the costume person took a pair of scissors to the fabric and cut a triangle out.
It makes sense. I don't know, like maybe because I have a larger nose, and like when I get blindfolded for like when I was a kid doing like games and stuff, like you can just look down and you can see the ground,
I like that you specified why you were playing, just in case anyone thought you got like a really like dark past. I used to be a reporter who went into like war zones and I had to get blindfolded all the time.
Yes, poor children of Canada have a very different upbringing. We all get to meet the Prime Minister, but we have to be blindfolded.
That's just an extreme sport. You go out looking for the moose, but you have to be blindfolded while you're doing it. It makes it an extreme sport.
It's a rite of passage.
No, I there's a lot of stuff in this plot. I mean, it's mostly just conversations between Garibaldi and Edgar's. Obviously, the Garibaldi's ex is there. There's also like a sort of test thing to do with him at one point, which we'll get to. But I liked a lot of this, even before we get to the big stuff, which is like getting to the plot and like what this guy's planning and what he's trying to recruit Garibaldi for and those details. there's lots of little things in it about Earth and Mars that I like, just mythology wise, like this idea that, I mean, it looked like a fairly spacious room by my standards, but he says, "Oh, sorry for the small house. You know, space on Mars is at a premium." And I'm like, that makes sense because it's a colony, and you've only got so much room in all these domes that they've built, presumably, and things like that. So there's just these little slice of life things that I quite enjoyed.
Yeah, I was questioning why Garibaldi had to be blindfolded when they were just in a tube going to a place. Like, there can't be that many places on Mars. And it's just a straight shot. So it's like, well, if I get on this tube, then I know where I'm going already. You think he would get blindfolded before they went in the tubes.
But he mentioned that he has his own private dock because he questions, like, what difference does it make? Because he says, are people not going to think it's weird when I get off wearing this? And he's like, no, it's a private terminal that they're getting off at. So I presume the whole idea is that he wouldn't know A, which one to get off at, and B, I presume that when they get off the terminal, the travel to the house. I assume the terminal's not right at the front door. Like, there's a little bit of a journey once they get off. I assume.
Yeah, I mean, it'd have to be the case because otherwise, it's just a straight shot there, and he's already on it, and he already knows which one he got on.
I mean, there could be turns. There could be turns in the thing we just don't see.
Sure.
Perhaps because it would be hard for the effects at the time to like. It has to be straight line just because it's easier to the computer to process.
Yeah,
that makes some sense to me.
But anyway, good blindfold.
Still in the blindfold, all right. No, I loved a lot of these little details. You know, I'm talking about the orange juice and how it's it's not that plentiful anymore, so it costs a fortune to get it shipped to Mars, which ties into things we've heard before about the coffee beans and things like that. You know, these natural resources that are a bit harder to come by.
Even oranges.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Sheridan
that was the thing.
Oranges.
Yeah, that was the thing. Yeah, Sheridan, right back at the start of his tenure, and he likes the pulp.
And the orange blossoms.
Yeah. So, no, there was a lot of interesting, juicy stuff out of this. Obviously, he wants to trust Garibaldi. Garibaldi needs to trust him. He's like, I can't really tell you much yet, but it'll be an interesting weekend. And ultimately, Garibaldi, he's taken to this small room, and he's abducted by masked men in the middle of the night and taken to an interrogation room. And then Edgar just talks to him, and he's like, no, the only reason why you were taken like this and not just asked to walk in is because mentally this test works better if you're unprepared for it, and it's like a shock to the system.
If you're under stress, also, because heightened emotions, as we know before, can often, telepaths can reach into you a lot easier.
Yeah. Because I think they've described it as before, or at the very least I've heard this in other things, the idea that when your emotions are heightened, it's like you're screaming your thoughts, and it's harder to like just not hear them because you're kind of yelling them because you're. And
they have a telepath in the room with him who has 0 lines, I'm assuming, so they don't really have to pay her.
I wonder
if she doesn't speak, then isn't she still just considered an extra?
I have to assume that there's a certain point where if you're on screen long enough, then that's null and void, and you're just still a supporting actor for the episode. Because like, there's special gimmick episodes of things where, like, if you look at the and I'm not just bringing this up to make a Buffy reference, but there's an episode of Buffy where it goes silent, it turns into a silent movie. Like, that's the gimmick of the episode. And so there's guest stars in that never have a line of dialogue, and I have to assume that in situations like that, it's like, well, this is a bit cheeky if you get away with saying all these guest stars you've got for the episode don't have to be paid. Because they don't have to be paid like the proper rate, I should say.
Well, yeah, if you're an extra in a movie, though, I think, or in a TV show, I think you don't get paid. I think you just you get to show up and say you were in a movie or a TV show. Because it's like that in Star Trek too, where Picard will talk to somebody, and we'll just see them nod and walk away. Like, they don't have an actual line. I mean, it would be appropriate for them to say aye aye captain or something, or acknowledged, or whatever, but they don't want to pay him, so.
You may be right. I don't know if I've ever heard of it being I've always heard of it as different, just like a different tier of pay, because I know in movies, a day of work for a non-speaking extra or a non-speaking part is like, I mean, I don't know what the numbers were, but it was something like, $30. But if they have a line of dialogue, then all of a sudden you need to pay them 150. Like, it's like quite a jump between speaking and non-speaking. But I have to imagine that if you're on screen long enough in a role, now I'm not saying this actor qualifies necessarily. I'm just saying that there has to be a limit where it doesn't matter if you're not speaking, if you're constantly there.
Yeah.
Surely.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, she doesn't speak, and it seems like it would be it seems awkward that she doesn't say anything at all. I mean, she even turns and nods at one point, but she doesn't like say anything or shakes her head. I mean, so it just seems like if there wasn't a pay thing involved, then it would make more sense for her to speak at least something.
I disagree on this. I don't think this felt weird at all. This didn't feel forced to me that she didn't speak.
I always think about it like, if they don't have a line, I'm like, oh, they just didn't want to pay him.
I mean, maybe you're right, but
and it feels a little awkward.
And in the context of this scene, I don't think it felt awkward at all. I thought it was the whole point is it just adds to the thing. Because she's meant to just be this like she's just there to listen and just confirm if he's lying or telling the truth. So all she's doing is nodding or shaking her head. It makes it purely visual. I didn't think this felt odd to me. It's more awkward than a scene where you talk to a waiter and the waiter just doesn't respond and walks away, because it's like, no, they would respond, and that's it. But this is like, no, it's like it's a creepy telepath, who's intimidating. Like, it made sense. It worked for me that she didn't speak. I didn't have a problem with it. But he asked questions like, you had a month of like missing time. Like, do you remember that? And it's very notable that he says no, and the telepath confirms that he doesn't. We know that we've been seeing flashes, of course, occasionally, but that doesn't really count as remembering where he was. And so what's interesting about all this is one of the questions they ask is, how do you feel about telepaths? And Garibaldi gets quite in depth about it. He says that
I don't trust them.
Doesn't trust them.
They killed my son. Oh, no, sorry. That was Kirk about Klingons.
Okay. No, he talks about how they can have secrets, they can plan and plot without ever saying anything, so there's no record of it. Eventually, they may actually become the dominant version of human, and we'll be second-class citizens to them. And he talks about a lot of his worries, and it's like, okay, this lines up with some things that he said before, but it does feel quite extreme. And obviously, throughout this entire thing, it's hard not to think about, okay, but how much of this is really Garibaldi and how much of this is the conditioning that was done to him by Bester and co. And I think what's really interesting is it progresses into the next scene with Edgar's and him, where he's like, okay, now I trust you because you've answered these questions and blah, blah, blah. And he talks about how he's worried about telepaths and that they're getting more powerful. And because he isn't like Clark. This is the thing, is he's also against Clark, as Edgar's guy. And so is Garibaldi, but they both agree that the way to fight it is not by going in with a military force like Sheridan is. And part of the reason why he believes that is because as Clark is becoming more desperate and scared and thinking that he's being challenged, he keeps giving more power to the telepaths. He keeps giving them more leeway and freedom to use their abilities in ways that are unconstitutional, in ways that are, impeding on people's freedom. And the more he does that, the more powerful the telepaths and Psycho are getting. I should say Psycho, not telepaths. The more powerful Psycho are getting. And they're not going to give that power up. And to be fair, this lines up with every all these little episodes we've had with Bester, where he wants to hey, Lita, give us your body when you die, because we want to see how to make telepaths even stronger. So much of what he's doing throughout the show feels like his end game is to make the Psycho even more powerful and more strong.
Yeah, I mean, it's the X-Men storyline of the normies versus the mutants. We don't want to give them power because they can easily overpower us, so we have to try to keep them try to neuter them in a way, keep them from from overpowering the rest of humanity. So it's just a matter of, do we treat them as equals an Xavier would, or do we treat them as different types of citizens like Magneto would? Yeah. So it's
in the context of X-Men, I think it's interesting as well that much like X-Men, we have Psychor, who are the villainous mutants in this case, and we have characters like Lita and Talia before she got, switched, where we have good telepaths who are innocent and using their abilities for good. And Lita repeatedly, in her episodes, has refused to do scans if the person's not given permission. She's very morally conscious about it. She really sticks to the code, if you will.
Yep.
So, I mean, the X-Men comparison is not a bad one. But you see, this motivation I think is very interesting, because it's like him wanting to actually take Clark down, but not via the method Sheridan's doing, and things, because whether or not we believe him completely yet, and whether or not there's more to it that he's not telling us yet. We know there is at least a little bit more, because he says that he's not told him everything yet.
Well, trying to buy in.
I just want to say, I think the idea though that what Sheridan's doing is going to make things worse, because it's going to make Clark more desperate, regardless of what anything else he says and the motivations behind it are true or not true. That part actually makes a lot of sense. And so even though we're typically on Sheridan's side, I'm like, that part actually does sound reasonable. Like, if Clark does keep giving more power over to the Psychor, like, them attacking Earth and trying to take Earth back from Clark is only going to make him more desperate and have him give out more power to Psychor. So that like, this is the thing where it's a really good idea. It's a really good character motivation, and or at least character goal, because I understand it. I can empathize with it. I understand the logic behind it. That's that old saying where the best villains, you can understand why they're doing what they're doing. If this guy is in fact a villain, necessarily.
If he's really being truthful, also.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I mean, it's hard not to think about the episode where Bester was on the station and was, it basically led to Garibaldi going to this guy on Mars. Like, that's why we were thinking that Psychor was this guy on Mars.
Well, I've got a theory in that, actually. That's something here that I think makes a lot of sense. I think we're actually starting to reveal what Garibaldi's endgame, what his conditioning is actually for. I think Bester has pushed him in this direction to go to this group, because I think this is Psychor wanting an inside man. I think Garibaldi is a plant from Psychor into this guy who's trying to take Psychor down.
Oh, okay. Wasn't the woman in the room also Psychor?
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's like. I think that's why they kill her, though. They don't want her going back and saying, "Hey," like, because it's a very quick. But yeah, the henchman comes in and kills her after her scene. But I presume
he does kill her. Okay, for some reason, I was thinking that he shot at Garibaldi.
What?
Because doesn't the door open and you just see a gunfire?
No, you see her react to it. You see her look at him and realize she's about to die.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah,
I was thinking that was weird. Like, I wonder how Garibaldi's gonna survive a gunshot point blank.
I'm pretty. Garibaldi was in scenes after that, though.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Maybe just my Benadryl brain.
No, but like
my allergies today.
but so I get, because obviously there's a use for telepaths, and that's why he uses one here to confirm Garibaldi feels the way he does. But it does kind of feel like Garibaldi's because there's so much of what stuff he says in this episode is yeah, Sheridan ever since he came back from Zahad Doom, he's completely different, and it kind of pokes that a little bit later with Franklin saying that he has kind of changed a little bit since Zahad Doom, because he's seen that a little. But with Garibaldi, it felt just like a switch flipped, and immediately he was getting angry about Sheridan, and he's like, "Oh, Sheridan's going to..." Because even in this episode, he says he thinks Sheridan might want to rule over Earth himself, and I'm like, I'm not getting that vibe from him at all.
No, but this episode did make me step back and be like, do I think that they're setting up Sheridan to be on the wrong side here? Like, I did think that at the end. Like, are they going to pull another Londo on me?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be as villainous necessarily as Londo, but this idea that he's going to learn that the tactics that he's using are the wrong. He's going to hit a point where, oh shit, I've made things worse by doing this, because I get into my own head and I convince myself that this was the right thing to do, to have this show of force, and really it was more of a vengeance thing. It was maybe, it was based on the wrong ideals perhaps than what he's saying.
Well, I mean, from the sound of it, like what the reason like Franklin even turns at the end and has that moment is because, he's had a moment with Sheridan who's told him his plan and has in confidence, and he's basically second guessing himself, like whatever the plan is, we don't know yet. Whatever the means that he's going to be using to try to win this war and bring down Clark is apparently morally morally compromised.
Yeah, well, I think we should make this clear though, because one of the main details there that's left out is it's specifically using the telepaths that they're trying to wake up, and the reason why Sheridan wants him to do that is because they're an integral part of whatever plan he's going to do. And it's also, I think, really worth pointing out that while Franklin does have this moment where he's like in shock at what the plan is, because we don't get to hear it yet, they're keeping it from us. He does say that
it'll work.
Well, he doesn't just say that it'll work. He says that it is the only way. That's the line he uses. He says that, he's trying to see another way of doing it, but he thinks Sheridan's right. It's the only way to actually pull this off, whatever it is. So, clearly it is something that is tough to stomach. It's something that he doesn't like. But he does ultimately say, yes, this is the only way this can work. I hate to say it, but it is. So he's, the end of that plot is that he's going to take Lita to Mars. So I do like how featured Mars is becoming, though, and we're going back there and we're getting different characters going there for different reasons.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's necessary too, because all the Mars stuff has been kind of like, I don't know, not great beforehand. Like, I tolerated it, but all the stuff on Mars before have been kind of like okay episodes.
You say all the stuff, it was like 2 episodes.
Well, not just that, like all the stuff in season 1 too. Every time they talked about Mars, I'm like, okay, there's stuff going on Mars, but it's not I'm not like paying attention to it. It doesn't seem very important to the overall story that they're telling.
That was just good background stuff. It wasn't like stuff it was focusing on.
Sure, but it was always the background part that I'm like, I don't know, logging away.
Sure, but I think part of the reason why I'm enjoying Mars being focused on more now is because they've seeded it in the background for like years. Like that Mars is important politically to the whole system. It's just we're only now getting to it.
That's why I'm saying that I'm glad that these storylines are like interesting now, because before it just seemed like, yeah, background stuff, cool, whatever. Put it in an encyclopedia for Babylon 5 and move on.
Yeah, no, I really liked all the stuff with Garibaldi and Edgar's this episode. I think like everything he proposes is interesting, and then it gets to the point where he flat out says that I'm not going to tell you the last part of what we're doing until you sort of prove that you're really on board and it's sincere. And he's like, well, what do you want me to do? And he's like, well, we need to stop Sheridan. How do we get to Sheridan? And Garibaldi's plan is to go after Sheridan's father. So Garibaldi, seemingly at the end of this episode, is on his way to Earth.
Not Clint Howard's father.
Yeah, he's on his way to Earth to get to Sheridan's father, who they can't find. Which feels, like a line is being crossed. It's one thing for him to oppose Sheridan. It's another thing for him to go after family. To go after a family member to directly stop what he's doing. And it's like, even if they somehow like reveal that he has been manipulated in his head, could Sheridan ever even look at him the same way again if he threatens his father, if he does something to his father? Like that will, like, even if you know they've been manipulated, it's hard to sort of get that out of your head, I think.
Yeah.
When you interact with that person again.
Sure.
So
we'll see. I mean, we'll see what the big plan is for, taking Daddy Clint Howard, who I think is already kind of in a bad situation, isn't he? From the war and stuff.
Well, he's sick and stuff, I think, because that's what they say. They're looking for his that's how Garibaldi says he's going to find him, because of his medication.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
But yeah, don't call him Daddy Clint Howard, because you're just making me think of Clint Howard. He's not Clint Howard.
I can't remember his name, but
yeah,
he's Clint Howard's dad.
He's Sheridan's father.
He's Mr. Howard.
You don't have to call him by any sort of actor name. He's just Sheridan's father.
Well, I mean, he's a name.
No, he's not.
Okay.
I wouldn't even know who he was if you hadn't told me.
Well, anyway, I think, I think it's setting up some interesting things here where, like, I don't know, like maybe I don't want to say that Garibaldi was right and they kind of pulled the rug out from under me, but like maybe they did a little bit. Like we'll see how this plays out, because I don't know if I trust this Mars guy yet.
Well, that's what's good about it, though, is that it's not that he's just right now and they've pulled the rug out from under us. It's that they've just presented us with an opposing view that actually makes some sense. It's not ridiculous. And while I don't trust Edgar's, because it kind of sounds like he wants to really control telepaths, and he's, you know, there's like a scene where he's got like 3 telepaths on tables and like they're experimenting on them, and it's like, okay, so he's clearly nefarious. There's some bad stuff going on here with them, and it seems like he might want to just kill them all, which is obviously very villainous in its own right. But the points he makes in talking about the political side and like Clark giving Psychor too much power, those parts do sound reasonable. And, you know, he even compares them to how, like, you know, groups in the past got in power. And I laughed because they did the Star Trek thing where they gave us a few after, like, present day. So it mentioned, you know, Nazis in the 30s, it mentioned so-and-so, and it's like, the French in 2110, and I'm like, what did the French do?
Like, we're tired of being the butt of all your jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was funny. Well, I mean, the 3 bodies that are in the, whatever that he, like, that are sickly, like, there is like some sort of telepathic disease that's going around, right?
That honestly, that seemed like he was developing one rather than trying to cure it to me. From that scene, it seemed too sinister.
He does just like let them die or like put them out their misery, basically.
Yeah, like that's the one part of it that's like, at least a little humane. He's like, well, there's no point in making them suffer unnecessarily, so just kill them now. Which is still, I mean, it's still villainous, but because he's put them in this position. But
sure.
I mean, we assume, like, maybe they were already sick, maybe he's just treating them, but the vibe of the scene felt a bit more nefarious to me.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to set that up.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I'm going on feeling they're more than like just like raw facts, but given
maybe he is like trying to stop the telepaths in his own way, and maybe he developed some sort of biological weapon.
Yeah, but between that scene and then, like, you know, having the Psychor, like, you know, agent killed. Well, I don't know if she was Psychor. I think she was just like a telepath for hire. Mm-hmm. So I think she's registered with Psychor in that she has to wear the gloves and the badge. Yeah. But so does Lita, and she's not. You know, she's Psychor in that she's registered with them, but she's not like part of Bester's.
She's an organ donor. Yeah.
She's not part of Bester's like militant Psychor group. You know, if that makes sense.
Right.
So yeah, that's when he gets killed. So I mean, clearly this guy is willing to cross some lines. And would Garibaldi be willing to go if he knew that woman was killed? If he knew about these people that are on tables? Because this is the thing. Well, Garibaldi has always been kind of iffy with telepaths. He did grow close to Talia, and he did care when she get killed. Which is why I was unsure what his answer would be when he was asked, like, how do you feel about telepaths? And be honest, like, he might say, well, I'm in love with one, or I was. Yeah. So I wasn't sure. And also, I guess, I think if he's
technically Ivanova is susceptible to this virus that's going around too. Possibly. I don't know if that's going to come into play or not. But
that's a good point. I never thought of that. That's a good point. I think with Garibaldi's truth thing though, assuming that I'm right in that he, like, his whole conditioning is to get him into this position so he can take this group down for for Bester and Psychor. It makes sense that they've conditioned this opinion into him. So he does believe it because he believes it. You know, like, it's not a natural feeling he has necessarily, but he does believe it.
I mean, the Psychor also, you know, took Talia apart, and he knows about that. Yes.
I wonder if they erased that though, or if they've, like, you know, muted that and shoved it further down to make sure that it's not interfering with their conditioning.
Right.
Because that would actually be quite beautiful. What if, like, the moment that makes him snap out of the conditioning is someone, like, tells him about Talia and says, remember what they did to Talia, remember how you felt about her, remember, like, you know, that could actually be quite an impactful scene if that's how someone, like, breaks him out of it, if they realize that something's not quite right. And I do love that, you know, I mean, Zach suspects something. Maybe obviously he's in no position to investigate it just now, but maybe that'll come up later. Which reminds me, I did really like the scene early on where he's like, hey, I need you to scan someone for me, and she's like, I'm not scanning. Like, no, the victim wants to be scanned, is willing, so you can see the perpetrator. And she's like, oh, okay, that sounds like honest work. Yes, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So, but no.
Zach's always great. More Zach, please.
Yeah. Well, just has a quick scene at the start of this one.
Which gets her into the, the sick bay.
Yeah, and we should probably mention some of the other stuff with so they've got like a telepath on the table Franklin's trying to work with, and he's not getting any results. But Lita basically,
she senses the shadows.
Yeah, and when she tries to push that away, that's what sort of like lets him wake up. And he collapses quite quickly after, but Franklin's like, oh, do whatever you did again slowly so I can like see what's affecting his brain, what the and he sort of he says, yeah, like basically something to do with like I'll use the Borg to compare this to something. It's kind of saying like because whatever the implant is couldn't connect to the collective of like the shadows, if you will, or the ship that they're meant to connect with. It's like they wouldn't wake up, and that's why they were staying. Whereas because Lita's like
they need a factory reset.
Kind of, yeah. But it's interesting that the guy, when he does wake up the second time, he tries to commit suicide because he's like, what am I? Where's the ship I was built for? Like, I can't live like this, and he just tries to kill it. And Lita has to like stop him with telepath powers, like in his hands, like like holding the sharp object like near his neck, and like she has to knock him back out. So I thought that was effective because it really sold the horror of what's been done to these people. Yeah. And that for as much as we're seeing this villainous side of telepaths with like the core psycho side of things, we have just this group of telepaths who are just nothing but experimental victims. This is the other side of like someone with powers where they're just lab rats to someone else, and the horror of that. And it's almost like this in a way doesn't justify, but it makes you sympathize with why telepaths might want to look out for themselves and not trust the other humans, because this is what happened. And this wasn't humans that did it, but the idea that other beings will treat them like this.
It adds an extra complicated step to Franklin's procedure also of like, okay, once we get them awake, how do we keep them alive?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, I think this episode does a good job of like presenting some interesting ideas, but giving everything like this extra layer where like, okay, we can see the argument that Edgar's is making for a lot of the Sheridan stuff. We can see now maybe the horror of how telepaths are treated. So maybe it does in some way you can understand why Psycho want to ensure their own future, even if the power trip that they might go on and the control they might have is too great, and there's a reason to like try and stop that as well. So it basically means, what I'm saying is that for every conflict that's presented, we can kind of understand both sides of it, and that's kind of neat from a writing perspective. It's quite well done.
Sure. And I like that Lita is like doing something for the ship again. Like she feels like she's, useful and helping, because I want her to have success. She's been a punching bag for too long. I need her to like be recognized for being good and doing the right things.
She did feel like she was in a better place this episode, and feeling useful. I do wonder though, because it didn't sound like Franklin had to take her with, but he wanted to. So he says, "Hey, you free? I need you for a big job." So I wonder, like, what their mission on Mars is exactly. What are they going to do?
And how is Bester's influence over her going to, affect things?
Yeah. It's like, is this still Edgar's related? Like, is this like coming to Edgar's from a different perspective because we're going to have someone going after to try and like read him, or is this about like her scanning someone who's going to reveal something about whatever? Maybe this will inadvertently lead them to what happened to Garibaldi. Like maybe they'll be looking for something else, and she'll scan something and be like, wait a minute, like they've done stuff to him.
Maybe he's got a tumor.
Yeah. Which that was the other thing. It was very reminiscent of like when Garibaldi was being operated on, except it was the aliens. Like when the telepath on the table like flashes back to being drilled.
That guy definitely shouldn't have watched Fire in the Sky right before going on his mission.
Yeah, like it was definitely that sort of vibe. Just for a split second, you just get that vibe.
Yeah.
No, I like this episode a lot actually. I think like obviously it was finding its footing again a little bit after the war ended because there was so many like things to set up. But between the Londo and Jakar stuff from last episode, which was really great, and then I think this Garibaldi stuff was already good because I like people caring about him and I like the conflict that it was kind of presenting. But this then tying in greater to the greater like conflict going on with Clark and Sheridan and the motivations behind it actually are quite. They have layers. It has layers again, and I'm kind of like, oh, this is a really. It feels like really shallow to just say it's deep, but it's kind of deep. Like there's a lot of things to it beyond just there's a conflict with a good guy and a bad guy.
Sure. Yeah.
So. Yeah. Yep.
I enjoyed the episode too, very much.
Yeah.
I'm actually surprised it's rated so much lower than the last episode.
Yeah, it surprises me too.
I'm not looking at the IMDb, but I did notice that when I looked it up earlier to see who this Edgar's guy was and if I'd seen him in anything else.
Yeah, I'd probably say this one's on par at least with the last episode. If I, if anything, maybe the last one was rated a bit highly on IMDb just because space battles. People like space battles.
Yeah, it is a bit more epic.
Yeah, but I think the intrigue of this one and kind of the other sides to all this are really good.
Yeah, and the shot of Sheridan at the end, or with like ominous music, like maybe he's the bad guy.
Are we the baddies?
Are we the baddies?
And I'm still pretty sure that Clark is the bad guy, but yeah, like. Yeah. It's this interesting idea that now that Sheridan's won, does that power corrupt where he doesn't realize that he is a bit more villainous naturally than he was when he was like... He doesn't have
a watcher anymore also.
Yeah.
The Vorlons are gone.
Delenne's on her way back to the ship. They mentioned that. You know, she's almost back.
That's good.
So yeah,
they can get married.
Yeah. I mean, Delenne's probably going to come back and like see what Sheridan's up to and be like, oh, I leave for like a week and he's like engaged war. Oh shit.
Yep. But she saved her planet, so that's good.
Yeah. So I love it. It is fascinating to think about like what the pacing of some of this stuff would have been like if they knew they were getting a season 5 and like how much more spread out the Minbari War and then maybe like the build up to some of this Mars stuff and like Clark and all that would have been otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't quite at the same level, but it is a little bit like Game of Thrones post when the books were written, where just like things just start speeding up real quick so they can get the story done. Yeah.
So, you know, and obviously...
I'm not talking about the quality of the show or anything as a comparison. I just, you know, things are wrapping up really quickly.
It's fascinating to watch just from a writing perspective, like just how JMS, like, had to handle thinking he was rushing to the end this season, and then next season it'll be fascinating to see, okay, he's got his finale in the can and he has to do 21 episodes after he's rushed through the material that was presumably originally supposed to stretch out to a lot of this. I know some things that he cut he already dropped sort of came back. Oh, by the way, did you read the comments about they stopped using the name Bureau 13 for a reason? Did you see these comments? No. Basically, GMS found out after he used that phrase or that name that there was an old board game with that name, and they didn't like try to sue them or anything, but GMS just chose to like not use it again because he didn't want to, like, you know, so he just shied away from it. So it's not that the organization doesn't exist anymore, it's just that they don't use that name anymore. But we don't really have anything else to call them, so
yeah, I suppose. I don't know if there's anything else that's been similar to Bureau 13. Like, I suppose they've been around still.
Well, I still think it's just
maybe they dissipated when, you know.
I think they're still there. I think it's just Bester's like core, like, you know, the ones in charge at Psycor basically. Okay. I think.
Okay.
People can correct me if I'm wrong. If it was meant to be more of a opposition to Bester, but I feel like that was still Bester's thing. So. Yeah.
All right.
We'll call him Bureau 14.
Nice.
No?
Easy fix. They just added a member.
I thought they picked 13 because it was ominous because, you know, unlucky 13. You're thinking there was 13 members.
It's just a joke.
It's a solid reason as any. It's a logical reason. But yeah, no, a really great episode. This is like, in terms of like getting my brain going and thinking about like what everything means and like the conflicts between the characters and the ideologies. This is definitely the most my brain's been firing since the end of the Shadow War. And that's not to shit on anything that's happened in between, but like I really loved a lot of what this episode was like poking at. So good stuff.
I agree. Good episode.
Well, let us know what you think of this episode of Babylon 5 in the comments below. You can like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications and all that stuff. And you can get us on the Twitters at @mail_fuzz for channel updates. You can check out other stuff we do, such as the Atomic Cinema Experiment. That's a sci-fi movie podcast that myself and Tara do over Mail Fuzz Movies, or on the podcast feed that's dedicated to it. Go check out that. Worth doing. Tara, why don't you tell them all about Patreon?
That's right, Peter. If you enjoy our reviews, please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/mildfuzztv, where you can donate as low as $1 per month and get a bunch of bonuses. And if you donate $5 per month, you'll get access to these Babylon 5 reviews 6 days early. Thank you.
And that'll about do it. So, once again, thank you for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Babylon 5. Just don't give away the home world.